and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.
Hello, Philippines. This is Lecain with World News Jam. We bring you the most interesting stories from around the world each week. We just don't give you the news, but we tell you the story behind the news, as well as read and answer your questions in an entertaining and easy to understand way. So please join us on DZRJ 810 AM Radio Bandito TV and get yourself updated with all the interesting news of the week from around the world right here on DZRJ's World News Jam.
Watch and listen to World News Jam every Sunday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. airing on Sky Cable Channel 224 and on all DTT boxes. Simulcasting online on Facebook and YouTube. Listen and watch on your mobile devices. Just search DZRJ Radio Bandido.
Hello and welcome to the World News Jam on RJTV and DZRJ's Radio Bandito. My name is Lecain here on the Jam. Now we talk about what's interesting in the world this past week. This week we will touch on the main headlines, U.S. politics, global matters, health issues, climate issues, and much, much more. Looking for better ways to understand what's happening outside the Philippines so we can be smarter. So let's see what's up. A lot of stories here on the Jam. I start by saying, when I was a kid, we used to ... It's true how things are different now. When I was a kid, we measured our popularity with how many Valentines we would get in school on Valentine's Day, or what number we were picked to play kickball, or later how many people signed our yearbook. Our popularity was based on the people around us, if 10 or 20 people liked us. But now, many of the kids today base popularity in the tens of thousands of people that they will never meet, all based on a 10-second video of themselves. Yes, I would be talking about TikTok. I thought we might lead with the big TikTok story because I have been asked so many times this week about it. And all the apps out there used to promote yourself. TikTok has got to be the fastest growing one. It was actually just a few years ago where we asked the big question, what's TikTok? Well, it's an app for people with small attention spans, which is quickly becoming most of us. Just quick movies about yourself usually. It came right at the right time, the pandemic. During the pandemic, the number of users of TikTok went through the roof and into the sky, filling the vast amount of free time we all suddenly had to endure. People with nothing to do were making movies by the millions, and the views and likes were coming fast and furious. 3-year-olds with permanent markers, cats talking with human voices, cursing grandmas, getting millions of views. But the issue today is, who's really watching all those videos? Yes, it's us, the bored, low attention super scrollers. But it turns out, also may be the Chinese government, who seems to always be watching us, waiting for the perfect time to strike. But what is that strike going to be? What info did they get? Our age, our political affiliations, how well we know how to do the doogie? Now, I believe everyone in the Philippines uses TikTok in some way, shape, or form. But right now, it's estimated that 150 million Americans use TikTok. That's almost half the country. Now, we have talked about TikTok here on the show before and how it's owned by a company called ByteDance, a major Chinese tech company, which is one of the few Chinese tech companies that has gotten very big, not only in China, but around the world. Currently, it's valued at about $3 billion. Now, the original idea, as far as I understand it, it was that this app was made for the Chinese, called Douyin. I mean, Facebook, YouTube, Google, Instagram, they're all banned in China. And the Chinese need to dance too, don't they? So, Douyin was made because, China doesn't want foreign apps in its country that it cannot control. It doesn't want the thoughts of democracy and free speech being spread in its country. But what I think it didn't expect was that TikTok would be as popular as it has become throughout the world. I mean, in the US, Android users spend an average of 38 minutes on Instagram, 41 minutes on Facebook, but spend an average of 82 minutes a day on TikTok. So US users are using TikTok twice as much as the American-owned company Facebook. This means that all of these Americans' information and habits is in the hands of a Chinese-owned company. People love TikTok so much in the US. There are reports of extreme TikTok addiction among teens, reducing working memory capacity and experiencing depression and anxiety. It seems 64% of teens would trade their right to vote for access to TikTok. That's a lot of power to have for a country that is an adversary of the US. So the US has decided to do something about this, for real. Congress got together and decided maybe we should ban TikTok from the US, remove the app from the App Store and block it from being used. Currently, Congress isn't so much with its time, doing much with its time, except failing to impeach Joe Biden. So why go after something so popular with the public? Well, it turns out that it's something that both the old guys in the Republican Party and the old guys from the Democratic Party could both get behind. The main issue is not being the content of TikTok, but rather the information the company might share with the Chinese Communist government. Believe me, whenever the word communist is used in a policy in the US, everyone wants to be first in line to claim that they are anti. Now, ByteDance is a private company, and they say they don't share information with the Chinese government, but the Chinese government is the Chinese government. They are a communist society. If you are in China, you are in essence part of the government. And if the government wants you to turn over information, then you do it. I mean, every company in China is controlled by the Chinese government. So if you have an app that can tell you what your subscribers want to see, what they want to hear, it knows their fears and worries. It knows what makes them feel good and happy. And after this week, from TikTok's own post, it also knows where you are. TikTok asks its users to call their congressman and demand that TikTok not be removed from America. And for TikTok to tell you who your congressman is, please write your zip code in the box below. The post mentioned the Americans' right to free speech and the right to use the app. Americans also love to hoop and holler about free speech. But in reality, it's not really about free speech or rights to use it. It's about personal secrecy and the right of a nation to stop foreign adversaries from interfering in, say, an upcoming election. The Congress has passed a bill that says that TikTok can continue working in the U.S. However, it must be sold to a U.S. company first. It cannot be owned by one of the most powerful tech companies in China, that being ByteDance. The only other alternative is to remove TikTok from the U.S. markets, and with the revenue of about $16 billion, this is not unlike what happened with the Chinese app Grindr, which was a very popular gay dating app. Congress thought that the app could be used to blackmail American users. So the company was forced to sell the app for $600 million. In any case, with ByteDance, the Chinese government owns only 1% of the company. However, the 3 board members, the Chinese government holds 1 seat. Now you're starting to see why the U.S. government is so scared. They also have created this bill called Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act. But even though the president supports the bill and says that he will sign it if and when it gets to him, still has to go through the Senate, and there are senators that get money from TikTok in the form of campaign contributions. Remember, this is the U.S. government where money sometimes does the talking. And of course, there's going to be the Trump factor. He actually tried to ban TikTok when he was president, though through an executive order, but that didn't push through and was struck down in the courts as non-constitutional. But then Trump decided he liked TikTok after all. Why all of a sudden would Trump like TikTok? Well, it's kind of a follow the money scenario. Trump said that if you get rid of TikTok, then Facebook will double their business. He called Facebook the true enemy of the people because he says they cheated him in the last election. Now, ironically, they were partly responsible for him winning the 2016 election, as Facebook was the platform for the now proven Russian campaign to get him elected, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, just 6 days before Trump did the big flippity flop on TikTok, he was with this guy, Jeff Yass. Of course, this leads to the idea that Trump basically will back any policy of whatever the biggest donor of his campaign is backing. Sort of a quid pro quo, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine kind of thing. Of course, when asked about his massive about face, Trump said, oh, well, there's a lot of young kids on TikTok and they would go crazy without it. Yes, Trump is very concerned about the kids' need for their TikTok. But I'm assuming that Trump thinks kids can influence their parents' vote somehow. In any case, this is not really a ban of TikTok or an attack on free speech. It's just the Congress flexing its muscles in something they can all agree on. So I don't think people should worry too much. Remember, this has got to get through the Senate. And as we all know, this is not going to be ever easy in any universe, security issues or not. You know, TikTok is not dumb. They know who and when to give money away. Now, the thing they didn't realize is that call your congressman message they sent to all American users telling them to call their congressman and tell them, don't vote for this bill. Well, it did not work. Well, mainly partly it did work. The phone calls into the congressional offices were ringing off the hook. Even little kids were calling their congressman. But what this showed the U.S. politicians was that how powerful TikTok has become. This Chinese company sent one single message and got millions of people to make a phone call. They were able to get millions of Americans mad at their congresspeople with just one simple post. This is, by all intents and purposes, has scared the crap out of some congresspeople. Basically, TikTok made the case for Congress just now. This is why TikTok cannot continue in the U.S. The Chinese company just has too much power. So the U.S. will get rid of TikTok. Well, if that bill gets through the Senate, the company will have 165 days to comply. Either sell it or pack up your 10-second videos and go back to China. Look at the amount of money that TikTok makes in the U.S. I would say they're going to sell it to a U.S. company. And then they would make it clear that the U.S. is a bully, which I don't disagree with. But at least they would keep the income stream flowing, and poor Americans would not have to give up their ability to dance badly. This is Eric Lecain on the World News Jam on DZRJ Radio, talking about interesting stories that are happening in the world this week. Let's move over to some U.S. news, of which Viktor Orban starts us out. He's the president of Hungary, best known around the world for moving Hungary from a free democracy to an authoritarian dictatorship. Well, he was in the U.S. having dinner at the Trump's resort, where in Florida he was with Donald Trump. Now, Victor is somewhat buddies with Vladimir Putin, and of course, we all know about Trump's love of Putin. He's a bit more sly and cunning, though. He's been very clever in changing his country into a place with no opposition against him, basically building a dictatorship and getting his people to like it. This meeting with Trump shows just how cunning he could be. After the meeting, he went into an interview. Orbán said Trump claimed that he will remove all funding from the Ukraine once he becomes president again. And of course, as we all know, if that were to happen, Ukraine would almost immediately fall to Russia. Ukraine relies entirely on the U.S. and its NATO allies to keep Russia from taking over the country and putting itself right on the border of Europe. Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, this week said if Putin were able to win that war, everything in the world would change. The borders of Europe would become vulnerable to the Russian military. The safety and security of France would no longer be a guarantee. This sentiment has circulated around multiple European leaders that this war must be won by the Ukrainians because also Putin has his eyes on the countries in the Baltic region. He said several times that he wants those countries back under the rule of Russia. He's even made comments about maybe the same thing happening to Poland. Trump said in an interview this week, again, that the U.S. has a bad deal in NATO and that America should not have to worry about Russia and the Ukraine because there's this thing called the ocean between them. But it has been pointed out that Russia has nuclear missiles that can fly over the ocean, and that if Putin were able to take over the country of Ukraine, that would give him the ability to use that country as a launching pad, much like he is currently doing in Belarus. In fact, Putin even mentioned just this week that he is ready and willing and able to use his nukes at any time. In any case, I don't think Putin would use his nukes on the U.S. if Trump were president, not because he would be afraid of retaliation. Like Viktor Orbán of Hungary, Trump seems to gravitate to these types of leaders. He wants to be friends with authoritarians. He wants to be part of the authoritarian team. Trump's never gotten along with most European leaders, just the ones that have authoritarian personas. Now, obviously, when Trump praises a guy like Orbán, it will make news, as he is what Trump wants one day to become. But when you invite him to your house in Florida, it does more than just make news. Victor, like Putin, has made himself basically president for life. He took over the country's court systems, took over the media, bent the government to point into a direction where there is no opposition. Things Trump has talked about wanting to do if he is elected president. Now, in Trump's interview this week, he was asked several different ways about the issue of completely removing the U.S. from the Ukrainian conflict and what problems that might cause the world. He used the same reasoning as he said before, that the Europeans should pay more because they are the ones closest and more affected by the war. Why should Americans be paying so much? But of course, that's not the deal in NATO. As I explained before on the show, it's not really based on who's the closest to the fighting or who sends the most bullets. Now, the U.S. is not exactly in the war, because if they were, this would be a whole lot more expensive. This is actually the cheapest solution currently for the U.S. and its allies. They are just funding the war while not having to actually be in the war, which of course would be much more expensive. Trump continually keeps making that point that the U.S. shouldn't have to pay for Europe's problems. And this plays very well with his base of people who love the idea of America first. But just to be clear, NATO was put in place not to just protect Europe, but for complete world order, to stop Russia from being able to launch nuclear missiles from, say, Cuba or Iran or North Korea. NATO and the U.S. are tasked with making sure nations like this wouldn't consider doing something like this because they could not stand up to NATO and the U.S. militaries combined. They could stand up against a single country but not over half the world's military. Now, Viktor Orban is the leader of Hungary, and Hungary is part of NATO. However, multiple times he's been the bad egg in the carton. He's the one that tried to hold the country of Sweden's membership to NATO. And with his dictator-type ways of controlling his country, he leans in more away from democracy and a bit toward theocracy. Many worry if Trump were to, say, win the election, he would team up with people like Orban, bring about an end to NATO. But there's a question. Could Trump win the election and set some of these possible futures in motion? He currently has 4 felony indictments against him, some of which are pretty solid cases against him. One of the questions I get asked the most here in the Philippines is what's going on with Trump's cases, and do you think he will be president again? Okay, well, first of all, let's look at the Florida case in which Trump took top secret records from the White House. Now, he did do that. The FBI did an early morning search of his home, and there they were. And according to the U.S. government, this is illegal. According to the law, those records don't belong to Trump, they belong to the country. Now, in general, when a president takes a top secret document to his home, it's usually by accident. They are moving out a lot of stuff, and occasionally a document marked top secret gets mixed in. Then after they realize that they have the documents, it's returned. No one is ever indicted. In fact, Joe Biden recently found some records in his garage. He called the National Archive up immediately, and they came and got them. He even allowed them to search his offices and his home. He even did an interview. Now, Trump did not do that. He took records purposefully and kept them. When the government asked for them back, he tried to hide them. In fact, this week, his driver came on TV and said that at the exact same time that the government was in Trump's house trying to get the records back, he, the driver, and Trump's other employee were loading boxes of government documents onto Trump's private plane to move them from Florida to New Jersey. He went on to explain about a plan to remove the footage from the CCTV cameras in Trump's home so no one could see them moving the boxes of documents. He even told about the Australian billionaire that met with Trump in Mar-a-Lago. The guy got into his limo saying how Trump had given him plans, or he had seen plans of a secret submarine deal the U.S. was involved in. Now you can sort of see why there's a big difference between the Trump and Biden cases. This is also why the special prosecutor Robert Hur, that's his name, Hur, was in a congressional hearing this week. By the way, he's a Republican and a staunch conservative. He said that the Biden documents case is nothing like the Trump documents case, and that's why he will not be prosecuting Biden. And remember, this is a Republican. So Trump will be prosecuted for removing classified documents and showing them to foreign officials and people without clearance and trying to hide them from the government officials. And by the way, the judge overseeing the case is also a Republican. In fact, one of Trump's own picks for judge. But this week, she ruled against Trump's fight to get the case thrown out. Trump said that he can't be prosecuted because, let's see if I got this straight, the government puts you in jail for stealing classified documents, however, not for personal documents. So Trump is saying that because he had documents, those government documents, they are automatically personal, so the case must be thrown out. Now, almost everyone has said, what? That's ridiculous. Even the judge in this case, who seems to favor Trump, finally said, okay, yes, that's ridiculous. And so, anyway, this case will proceed, even though it will be delayed, which is the main purpose behind many of these motions by Trump. Now, moving on, in his Georgia versus Trump case for racketeering, one of the Trump co-defendants is trying to get the case thrown out because they are saying that 2 of the prosecutors had a fling while doing the case. Because they were in a hot and heavy relationship that maybe The state prosecutor put her boyfriend on the case so she could get extra money from him. But the judge this week said that the fling wasn't such a good idea. However, there's no wrongdoing and the case can continue. But the boyfriend, who by the way is no longer the boyfriend, has to go. In any case, even though there was no wrongdoing, and it's not against the law to have a relationship, Trump people will, I'm sure, continue to say the prosecutor is corrupt. Now, in the New York case, the porn star case, which is supposed to start in March, Trump's lawyers are arguing that the case cannot go forward because he may have immunity from prosecution because even though he allegedly slept with the porn star and made the payoff deal before he was president, he made some payments to the woman while he was president. So that means, according to Trump, that the whole case should be dismissed because you can't prosecute a president even if he is no longer the president. So we'll just have to wait and see if or when that case will go to trial. Actually, we are going to wait on the Supreme Court to decide if Trump can or cannot be prosecuted for a crime just because he was president. As we know, Trump cannot be prosecuted if he is the sitting president. That's a given. But does he get out of jail free for the rest of his life for all crimes he may have committed? So, as of now, many believe that Trump is running for president just to stay out of jail. And if he's able to win the election, then he will have to follow his friends Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin to make himself president for life as to stay out of jail in the future. Speaking of Trump becoming president this week, he said that if he becomes president, everyone will want to be his vice president. Can't wait to see who that is. He said that even that the Democrats will want to be his VP. Now, that would seem somewhat hard to believe, seeing that his last vice president, who's completely and utterly loyal to Trump, did in the end get blamed for Trump's loss in the election, and his people made the attempt to hang him by the neck back on January 6th. By the way, that Vice President Mike Pence made an announcement this week. He will not endorse Trump for president. This means, I think, every single person in Trump's cabinet during his presidency no longer supports him, or is indicted, or has been sentenced and waiting to go to jail, or has already been in jail. But the question is, can Trump stay out of jail long enough to get to the election? Well, with all the delaying tactics he's currently using, will it work? It's true that the judges are striking down all of these constant arguments he's bringing to court. However, it does seem to be working. Every case so far has been put on hold for some reason or another. And these delays could keep the prosecutors and the judges at bay just long enough. But one thing he cannot keep at bay are the civil judgments against him in his $500 million civil cases. This week, he had to put up $91 million bond in his sexual abuse case against 𝗡𝗄𝘀. But the funny thing is, with that case, Trump was found liable for sexual assault and had to pay $5 million. Then he was found liable again for constantly defaming her to the tune of $80-some million. But this week, Trump basically did the same thing again. He said he never met her. He didn't know her. He never committed the crime. He did the same thing that cost him $80 million before, which means, in theory, 𝗡𝗄𝘀 could sue him again for defamation. Now, none of this is included in the $454 million he owes for the fraud case. Now, the big deal there is, where is Trump going to get that kind of money? Now, he put up the $91 million for his appeal, which until now, no one is sure exactly where that money comes from, but it looks like the Chubb Insurance Company. The bond will, in essence, stop 𝗡𝗄𝘀 from collecting from Trump until the appeal is complete. So if Trump loses the appeal, the insurance company will pay, then Trump will owe the insurance company. But this still doesn't cover the whopping $450+ million in the fraud due this month, or about in a month. One possible way to pay all these bills could be the Republican National Committee. See, Trump had installed recently his daughter-in-law as the co-chairman of the RNC. Now, this has worried a lot of Republicans who believe that Trump may start trying to use the RNC's money to pay his legal bills. You think? Now, Democrats, of course, think this is a great choice. The RNC is not doing so great financially anyway, and many of their big donors are stepping back in lieu of this week's big news that the Trumps are basically taking over the RNC, which is leaving openings for Democrats in some smaller races, such as governor and congressman, in which Republican candidates will have very little to no RNC money to spend because the Trumps took it all. Now, the officials and operators in the RNC will most likely stop Trump's daughter-in-law from doing that, if it were not for the fact that many of them were fired this week. As soon as she got a hold of the reins, anyone that has questioned Trump's using funds for his own legal fees has been fired. Got to get that $500 million from somewhere. So let's see if all of these Trump strategies work. It's around 8 months until the election. Will it be Biden or will it be Trump? Will Trump win the election at the same time he's being sentenced to jail? Well, if that were to happen, we will tell you about it on our show coming up in November. This is Lecain on the World News Jam on DZRJ Radio and RJTV. Well, this week is the Russian election for president. We still don't know the official outcome, but I will bet anyone $1,000,000 pesos Putin is the winner. I know it, European allies know it, and the people of Russia know it. Putin is running against 3 other guys. And those guys are, well, it doesn't matter. All the real opponents are dead or in jail or exiled. Some have even asked the question, why is Russia even having an election at all? While most of the world calls this election a total sham, it matters to Putin that the election at least has the appearance of being somewhat legitimate. But with the death of Navalny, the only real opposition to Putin's most anti-Putin people, well, they're not even bothering to show up to vote. Or if they are showing up to vote, some of them are putting dye in the voting machines instead of their ballots. This, of course, destroys all the ballots inside. It's their protest to the authoritarian rule of Putin and to the Ukrainian war, which is still going on. This is life in Russia. You can't speak out against the war or Putin without risk of going to prison. One man was sent to prison because of a drawing his daughter made in school depicting missiles flying over the Russian flag toward a Ukrainian mother and a child. His daughter was sent to an orphanage while he was sent to prison. In other words, if you like Putin, then you can cheer. But if you don't like him, just stay silent. Don't leave your house. After this election, Putin will be the longest serving leader to Russia since Stalin. He has bent and twisted the constitution of Russia to make sure he stays the president of Russia for life. He was once a KGB agent, making a salary of about $40,000 per year. And now he's the president of Russia. And some people say he might just be the richest man on the planet. How did he get so vastly rich? Well, rich Russians who didn't support Putin, and even some who did, have had to hand over their companies to Putin. They were called extremists or spies, foreign agents. Many are accused of stealing from their own companies. Putin has criminalized the expression of any alternative opinions to his own. College student named his Wi-Fi network Salva Ukrainia, or Glory to the Ukraine. He got a 10-day prison sentence for that one. Now in the election, which ends today, there are no anti-Putin candidates running in the presidential races against Putin. None are against the Ukrainian war. All 3 are on Western sanctions list. All 3 are anti-feminist, anti-homosexual, and are all for decriminalization of domestic violence and outlawing any bills for gender affirmation. Basically, they are all handpicked to run against Putin. So, when asked who is running in the election, many Russians will say Putin is. They won't even be able to name any of the other candidates. But they all know about the war. Some do support the war, however, many seem do not. Right now, the Russian military is not seen as backing down at all. And in Russia, they are currently producing more munitions than the US and Europe combined. That comes to around 250,000 shells every month. And now Ukrainians' funding has stalled in the US Congress. Meanwhile, Russians are stepping up their manufacturing of all kinds of weapons. Many have said that the outcome of the war will mostly depend on who can win the battle of manufacturing. As of now, Russia is firing 10,000 shells a day, while the Ukrainians are only able to fire about 2,000 a day. I know we have talked about Americans giving the Ukrainians M1 Abrams tanks and F-16 fighter jets. However, experts say the real power is coming from the munitions. The gap in munitions will soon widen if the Republicans in Congress continue to stall the funding of Ukraine. According to sources, Russian artillery factories are running 24 hours, 7 days a week in rotating 12-hour shifts. The number of people working in the defense sector in Russia has gone from 2 million before the war to 3.5 million now. And if you remember, we're talking a week ago about the huge amount of weapons secretly being shipped from North Korea, huge orders coming in from Iran. Russia's not backing down one step as we may have thought a few months ago. In fact, they're currently stepping up their game. But there are limits to what Russia can do, and this is where the West is hoping it can make up the ground. Germany is planning to open a factory in Ukraine which will produce 155 millimeter caliber bullets as well as artillery shells. This is where the US and the West think that in the long run, if Ukraine can just hold out, Russia can't win. I mean, in the short term, the Russians are run by a single person, Putin. There's no need to go to Congress or to Senate to ask for money for a war. Putin can do anything he wants, which is great in the short term. But the West has money to build more and more factories, and that's something that Russia lacks. So neither side looks as if they're going to make up huge ground in the foreseeable future. Of course, a lot of what will happen will be in the long-range missiles and the drone game. Here's where Russia has a slight edge, and they are able to hit infrastructure targets. I mean, if you want to stop someone from shooting at you, blow up the factory that's making the bullets. But many are talking about what could be the biggest decider of this war, and that is, I hate to say this, Trump. If he wins the election in November, the war could come to a close very soon after. I mean, no one believed that the war would go on this long. And it is mainly because the weapons that are passed to the Ukrainians from the US. This has been the real tipping point of the war. And if the backing of the US will just disappear, experts are saying they don't believe Europe could cover the void. This is why when Trump made that infamous comment that he will no longer fund the Ukrainian war, many were very worried this would be the end for the Ukraine and the beginning of a new world order. But in the meantime, if anyone wants to take that bet that Putin will be the next president of Russia, I'm here. That would be a very unfair bet, though. Just hoping the world doesn't become all authoritarian leaders with no reason for elections anymore at all. Just like backstepping to when we had kings and queens and czars. This is Lecain on the World News Jam on RJTV. So, if you were at the border of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, you may have noticed something unusual. People. Lots and lots of people. Old ladies with parcels on their head, young kids carrying the same, all kinds of weird vehicles, wheelbarrows, filled to the top with everything. Soft drinks, noodles, and cookies, all carrying something. You see, they have all been shopping in the DR to get supplies, mainly to keep from starving. As of now, there is nothing to eat in Haiti, and the border to the DR is only open 2 days a week. It's a race against the clock to get as much as you can before the border closes. Currently, the UN Food World Program Director says that 1 million people in Haiti are on the brink of famine. As we reported here back in 2021, the president of Haiti was assassinated by a group of Colombian mercenaries. Since then, heavily armored and politically connected gangs have steadily taken control of the capital of Port-au-Prince. A rash of killings, kidnappings, and rapes have taken over the city. This month, things have gotten much worse because some of the gangs have joined together. They burned down all the police stations. They're taking over the shipping and the airports. Almost 360,000 people have been displaced, and most of those are children. Now, the U.S. and other Caribbean nations have tried to step in and put life back in order in the small country. You know, that's kind of the U.S.'s thing to do. However, the gangs don't want any part of a solution backed by any international communities. The currently so-called leader of the gangs that are ruling the countries, his name is 𝗪cie𝗿𝗋𝗀𝗀𝗪. He said, it's the Haitian people who are going to take destiny into their own hands. Haitian people will choose who will govern them. End quote. Currently, it is these gangs that are running the government in Haiti. They control the food prices of stocks coming to the country, and they have roadblocks set up to see who can travel and why. And blockades are set up at the ports to stop foreigners from coming in and people from leaving. Currently, public and private hospitals are shutting down all over the country. And most of the supplies and equipment have been looted already. And worse yet, the borders have been shut down completely, except for those specific times 2 days a week. The Haitian jails have all been wrecked and the prisoners are all free. The government of the DR doesn't want to chance those prisoners getting over the border and into their country. Now, people who are not criminals can come into the DR to get supplies, but must immediately return to Haiti in the allotted time. Many blame the problem on politicians who can't seem to come together on anything and instead use gangs to stay in power. However, now those gangs have taken over the country, and the country is slowly falling to pieces. Currently, people very rarely even leave their homes as police and gangs are continuously shooting at each other. What used to be bustling streets and markets are now all but empty. And besides, there's no reason to go to the markets because they are empty. The gas stations have no gas, but it doesn't matter because there are roadblocks everywhere stopping you from going anywhere. And if you get hurt out in the street, it's best just to go back home. Don't attempt to go to the hospital. The only way into the airport is via helicopter, and even there you need all kinds of approval. The only way to get into the airport is via helicopter. Supposedly there are planes, though, that will take people out of the city, but the fare is $10,000. The average salary for a Haitian is $4 a day. Almost 80% of the main city in Haiti is under gang control now. The current actual president, who was appointed just after the last one was assassinated, just decided to resign his post. He was just about to sign a request to Kenya to send 1,000 UN-backed police officers, but that idea has seemed to be in limbo now, as he can't even return to his country without the risk of being killed when he lands. They have tried to have an election before, but the violence was just too much to try it, and the election would just be deemed compromised anyway. Once the current president is out, he will hand over power to a transitional council. But as of now, this council has not been formed, and they can't decide who's going to be on it anyway. It seems the only way to save Haiti is to bring in foreign fighters to keep the peace. But when? The UN Council is currently in talks about what is to be done in this situation, because the main gang leader has said that coming soon, it's going to be a civil war. Many officials in Haiti are begging for international assistance to help the country. However, at current, the gangs are building strength, growing in numbers. More people are joining. The current government has declared a state of emergency and put in a nighttime curfew in effect, and still no one seems to know what to do anymore. No one is sure who's even in charge anymore and how long the current government will even stay in power. What do you do in this kind of situation? The world is continuing to be a very dangerous place, I think. And this is the World News Jam on RJTV, channel 224 on Sky Cable. So let's get over to some science news. Now, have you ever heard of plant-based burgers? That's a burger that's supposed to taste like a burger, but has no real beef in it. It was a really big thing for a while there, although I'm not sure how much it really caught on. Most people that go into a burger place usually do so because they want a burger made of beef. But what if we looked at this from another direction? What if, now follow me here, we start having a beef-based plant, or maybe an infused plant with beef? Now, why would anybody want to do that? Well, we can talk to a team of South Korean researchers that have been working on a type of rice that is infused with beef. Now, we have all had beef rice, which is rice with beef topping, but this is not that. This is a rice that has been artificially infused with beef. In other words, adding the cells of a cow into the rice. First, you need to coat the rice with a fish gelatin to help the meat cells latch onto it better. Then insert the muscle and the fat stem cells into the rice grains, which are left to culture in a petri dish. See, animals have a microscopic biological scaffold. Helps cells grow to form tissues and organs. Rice grains have a porous, organized structure that mimics this scaffolding, as well as molecules that further nourish the cells. The meat cells then grow on the surface of the rice grain and inside the rice itself. Get it? After about 9 to 11 days, you get the final product. So again, why do this? Well, it gives you the nutrients of the rice and the protein of the beef. So you won't need to get rice with beef topping. You just have one product. Now, when you see it, it doesn't look totally appetizing. I mean, it's pink. Go figure. But think about the applications of such a product. For one, places where food is not plentiful. This could be the answer to a nutritional meal without the need for cold storage. Also, removing the risk of disease in some countries from meat products. Beef cultures can be produced in a lab, and in one day can produce the quantity of a factory. This would lessen the need for raising cattle, which is responsible for 6.2 billion tons of carbon dioxide entering the atmosphere each year. That's 12% of all human-caused emissions. And beef production is mostly carbon intensive. But here's the thing, beef-infused rice is cheaper. Well, it just costs a fraction over the cost of just the rice. It's like getting beef protein almost for free. These scientists believe that one day they won't even need the cow anymore. They can create a cell line of a cow that can continue to divide and grow in a lab over a long period of time. This can create a sustainable food system, but this is just the beginning stages. It's going to take a little bit more time to develop the process so the cells can grow better in the rice grain, which will produce a better nutritional value. Also, they're helping to improve upon the taste, which is something that will help people wanting to actually eat this stuff. But can you imagine? This could be the solution for world hunger, or, what to eat if you get stuck on the moon. Let's get to some climate news, which we haven't done in a while. As we know from previous shows, one of the biggest problems on the planet is the warmer temperature in the Arctic Circle. Now, seawater or salt water is thicker and heavier than fresh water, which means it's usually deeper, especially levels, and colder. But the issue has been the ice caps have been melting too fast and filling the ocean with fresh water. This means the more warmer ocean is sitting on the top of the layers of water as they funnel up and down with the currents. This is causing major problems. First of all, more fresh water sits on top of the ocean. The warmer the ocean will be. The ice that sits on the surface will melt faster, creating a cycle of putting more and more fresh water into the ocean. And of course, the aquatic life doesn't know how to deal with this. They end up migrating at the wrong times, in the wrong place, etc., etc. But Also, this kind of instability in the ocean has a greater effect on the overall climate. With the warmer water sitting on the top, more will be absorbed into the air. Storms will be affected, temperature on land. Some scientists in Canada, though, they have an idea. They think they can fix this. Sounds kind of insane when I tell you, but also kind of genius at the same time. They want to artificially slow the process of the deep ocean warming so much that it will atrophy the water all around. In other words, through this wacky geoengineering plan, they will be intervening in the Earth's climate system to artificially counteract the damage we have done to it already. So, basically, they are trying to reduce the energy that is absorbed by the Earth. The way they want to do this is to thicken up the ice on the surface by bringing more seawater up. In the area they're in the Arctic, by the way, it's negative 30 degrees Celsius with a chill factor of 45 Celsius, so it's really chilly. So first they will drill a hole in the sea ice that naturally forms in the wintertime. Then they will pump up the seawater to the surface. Seawater freezes very fast at that temperature, which then thickens the ice on the top even more. Then snow falls and creates better insulation that keeps it cooler. This makes the ice freeze on the underside where it contacts the ocean. The idea being that the thicker ice will stay there longer. It will survive during the melting season. Get it? Kind of. This means the sun's heat cannot get lower into the ocean. In fact, they are trying to reverse it almost and make sure that the colder surface stays at the surface instead of going down below. Now, some scientists are saying this is nuts and this shouldn't be messing with the natural order of the ocean. Another scientist said if you do the math, it will need 10 million wind-powered water pumps to thicken the ice for over just even 1/10 of the Arctic. In other words, does sound kind of insane, doesn't it? But no more insane than spraying sea ice into the clouds to make them more reflective to the sun. That's also being tried right now. Some actually are quite angry about these kind of experiments being done. The UN climate body is one of them, saying that these approaches can be dangerous, that these guys could disrupt global weather patterns by doing this. Some researchers even want to ban these types of experiments. One of the directors of the Center for International Environmental Law said, geoengineering technologies come with enormous uncertainties and create novel risks for ecosystems and people. The Arctic is essentially sustaining our planetary systems. Pumping seawater onto sea ice on a large scale could change the ocean's chemistry and threaten the fragile web of life. He goes on, frankly, and this is his quote, "This is insane and needs to be stopped." The way to solve the crisis, according to him, is to decarbonize. It's the best and only way to move forward. So, not everyone is on board with this kind of geoengineering, but the people involved in the research are pointing out that the Arctic sea ice is indeed declining. In fact, the Arctic Ocean is likely to be free of sea ice by the end of summer 2050. And this will cause disruptions worse than anything we have now. A report was released recently that snow and rain in the Arctic has increased by 15% since 1950. In spots in the Arctic, September 22nd was the third wettest year in the past 72 years. This means that the temperature is heating up enough to create precipitation in the driest place on Earth, the Arctic. In fact, there's a town in northern Alaska which had the wettest day in history just this past July. Places like this are not used to rain falling. Professor said the infrastructure that's in place, the drainage systems in the villages, the urban areas, it's designed for the past. As we get into these new extremes of precipitation, the infrastructure is not going to be able to handle everything that's falling on it. Usually it's too cold for precipitation to develop. Warmer temperatures mean more moisture evaporating from the ocean, which will eventually precipitate out and show up as snow or rain. So here lies the problem. So carbon emissions, through the carbon emissions, it's gotten so hot. So now, can the scientists fix these issues that we, the humans, have caused? Or will they make it even worse? Can they cool down the ocean with a couple of water pumps? Just like trying to clean the streets of Manila with a toothbrush and a cup of water? Or can we just not see the genius of these scientists? Well, I don't know. I'll keep updating you on this story. Either we will fix the problem or just be talking about what new problems we have caused. Anyway, this has been the World News Jam on DZRJ and RJ TV. My name is Eric Lecain. Thank you so much for spending your time with us to discuss stories going on around the world. Please join us next week for more of the World News Jam. So for now, everyone be safe out there, and we will see you next week.
The views and comments of the hosts and guests are not necessarily those of the station.